Well, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's session. Firstly, thank you to TDRA for inviting us to share this particular session with you. Today is all about the power of language in business writing, and this is part one of a two-part series which we're going to be offering to TDRA Virtual Academy on this topic. So welcome to everybody. And the first thought for the day is this. In the words of Harvard Business Review, a company is only as good as its writing. So that's a bit of a backdrop to today's session. A company is only as good as its writing. And I think really highlights the importance of business writing to an organization and to individuals within an organization. So a little bit of an introduction first to myself. My name is Catherine Bentley. I'm originally from the UK, background in the UK, where I worked for the first 16 years of my career in financial services, in general management and marketing management roles. Moved to the UAE back in 2005, and my time since I've been in the Middle East has been focused completely on people development, so training, coaching and consulting. And there has actually been really a thread of communication skills, training, coaching throughout that. So I'm very, very pleased to be sharing this session with you today. So let's have a think then about what we're going to be covering in today's session. We're going to take a look at what really is business writing. What is it? What are we trying to do when we're engaged in business writing? I'm going to share with you some background, some concepts, some frameworks about the art of persuasion, the Rhetoric Triangle, and the AIDA model. You may be familiar with this, particularly if you've worked in any kind of marketing role. And look how this applies to business writing. And then we'll start to look at the power of language. And today, looking at plain English, how we select words and phrases, and what kind of protocols, what kind of rules apply to sentences and sentence discipline in business writing. So that's really our roadmap for today, building those into any kind of personal action plans we can take away. So, start point. Where are we now? Where are we now? I just want us to have a think about this. I think it's always a good idea when we're looking at any kind of skills development. Where do we really think we are now on the business writing scale? So if you think about your own standard of business writing, where is it on this scale? So we have at one end of the scale what we call maddening business writing, and we've all seen that. We've all had to read business writing which we could describe maybe as maddening. That's where spelling mistakes, grammatical inaccuracies, confusing words, maybe the wrong word, sometimes overlong sentences, very difficult to read and navigate through. Does that sound like your business writing? Maybe. Moving further up the scale, we have what we call mediocre business writing. And this is the kind of business writing that just about gets the job done. Functional, makes the point, doesn't necessarily assist in relationship building or create a magnificent experience, an impactful experience, but it gets the job done, mediocre. And then we have right at the top of the scale, what we call magnificent business writing. This is where things are accurate, we're choosing the right words each and every time, and the relationship is enhanced by the standard of business writing. And what I'd like you to do is think about, where is your business writing most of the time? Is it maddening, mediocre, functional, or is it magnificent? And I'd like you to please share that with us, maybe on the chat box, where you feel you are right now which of these 3 words would best apply to you? I'll give it a few seconds for you to share where you think your business writing standard is right now. You can share it with us, please, on the chat box. Just one of those 3 words, guys. The one which best applies to your business writing standard right now. Please try and be honest. We wouldn't expect everybody to be magnificent. If that was the case, there would be no need for skills training sessions like this. So we don't expect that. Looking for one word: maddening, mediocre, or magnificent. Okay, so I think everybody's a little bit shy on this one. We're not getting a lot of responses on this. Maybe this is something you can think about as we're working through the session today. Where are you on this scale? Yeah, and feel free at any time to add this. So Nadine, thank you. Mediocre. Yeah, she wants to reach magnificent after the session. That's what we're aiming for. And Nadine, if I was to tell you that the vast majority of people that we work with on the programs would rate themselves as mediocre, And mediocre is functional. It gets the job done, more or less. So why would we be aiming for magnificent? Well, this really is the reason why, the communication difference. Yeah. So Jim Rohn, a business guru, said, if you just communicate, you can get by. So you will get the job done. But if you communicate skillfully, you can work miracles. Yeah, being impactful. Yeah, building your own personal brand through your communication and relationship building. And that's the difference. That's the difference between mediocre and magnificent. So let's have a think then about business writing. And when we're tasked with having to do some kind of business writing, how do we typically feel? What kind of image do we have? Someone says, okay, you've got to write a particular email, report, write for a presentation. How do you typically feel? Would it look something like this? Very relaxed, words flowing freely? Maybe sometimes, yeah? Or could it look a little bit more like this? Yeah, can't quite find the words. Yeah, don't know where to start. Yeah, so much material that we've got to include. Where do we start? How do we sort it? Maybe it's somewhere between the two. Yeah, and maybe it depends on the type of business writing. Okay, so what we're aiming for is to be in a situation with our levels of confidence and skill where it's the former, where it looks more like this. Yeah, very relaxed, words flowing. And we're creating these magnificent communication experiences each and every time. So let's just stop and think though. First question is, what is business writing? Because we talk about it, yeah, business writing, but what essentially are we trying to do when we're involved in business writing? And this can be how we might be not approaching things in the correct way from the outset, yeah, and less likely to achieve magnificent communication experiences. And what business writing is all about, the first thing I want us to think about is that business writing essentially is persuasive writing. Persuasive writing. When we're involved in business writing, we don't have some of the other tools that we've got if we say in a face-to-face communication situation, where we can smile, where we can use body language, where we can use eye contact, gestures, tone of voice. Yeah, but we still got to persuade the reader of a particular thing, whether it be the facts are true, a particular concept, or whatever. So business writing is persuasive writing. So we've got to think about what kind of frameworks, what kind of models, what kind of tools, techniques we can use to persuade the reader. In the absence of things like body language and so on, yeah? How we can use business writing to persuade. So the first thing I want to introduce to you, maybe something you're familiar with. We're going back, way back in time now, to Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived quite a long time ago. And back then, Aristotle recognized what he called principles of rhetoric. And what does rhetoric mean? Rhetoric is about the art of speaking or writing effectively to either impress, please, or persuade. Okay, this is the art of rhetoric. And Aristotle discovered this and came up with a framework a long, long time ago. The principles still hold true today. So let's just have a look at how it works. Aristotle introduced what we call the Rhetoric Triangle. And in the Rhetoric Triangle, we've got three aspects. If you think about life generally, we see all the best things come in threes, yeah? Earth, wind, and fire, and so on, yeah? And it's the same thing here. The Rhetoric Triangle, we've got three aspects. The first one is what we call ethos. What does ethos mean? Ethos is all about the writer. The writer's character and reputation, credibility, essentially. So about the way that we write to create professional presence and personal presence. Yeah, we say in business writing, your writing becomes your face. And if we think about that, we might approach writing in a different way. Yeah, it becomes your appearance in the absence of your physical presence. So ethos, how we use words, language, and so on to really convey our professional presence, our personal presence on our own brand and the brand that we're representing. Ethos. Second aspect in the triangle is what we call pathos. Pathos is about the reader, the audience for the communication. So here we're thinking about how we connect with the audience, what we might already know about the audience if we know something, but essentially how we write to connect with the audience. That's pathos. And it's understanding their needs, their expectations, and their emotions. And how we write in a way that we connect with each of those, their needs, their expectations, and their emotions. So ethos, pathos, and the third aspect is what we call logos. Logos, you might be able to, if you're not familiar with the word, you might be able to guess that this is about logic. Yeah, so it's about the subject that we're writing about. So presenting accurate, logical information, where we use the writing to convey clarity of purpose, direction, and what we want the outcome to be. So Rhetoric Triangle, we can use actually for all types of communication, yeah? Here we're talking specifically about business writing. So these three critical components. And when we look at very good, strong writing, it really ticks these three boxes. So ethos, it presents the writer as trustworthy and authoritative. We'll be looking at how, the rest of today and the next session as well. Logos, we use logic, reasoning, and evidence to present the subject. And we set it out in a clear, consistent way. And then pathos, appealing to the emotions, beliefs, and expectations of the audience, of the readers. These are the three, what we call tactics of rhetoric. So I want us to think about this as we examine the different areas of language in business writing, how we actually tick these three boxes. This is the rhetoric triangle. The other thing that we need to be thinking of as a framework is the AIDA model. As I said earlier, if you've been involved in particularly marketing work, you'll be very familiar with the AIDA model. It's about A, getting the attention of the reader. In the same way that a marketing person will be looking at any kind of marketing communication to capture attention, we need to be doing the same thing in business writing. Yeah, capturing the attention, and then I really starting to generate and increase interest. So that then leads to a desire, either for the individual to take a particular course of action, to adopt a particular belief, or whatever we're trying to communicate, and then creates the right kind of response or action. So AIDA principle, equally valid in business writing as it is in any kind of marketing communication. So they really are the two main models, for us to think about as we start to examine the particular aspects of the power of language in business writing. Important that we think about these. Yeah, in business writing, as I said earlier, we don't have the other tools that we've got in face-to-face communication, even in telephone conversation. Yeah, we're reduced in what we can actually do. So we've got to really make sure that we use the right frameworks to generate the right kind of response in the reader. So let's start to think now about the power of language. All right, power of language. These are the basic building blocks for business writing, power of language. So today we're going to look at two aspects. The first two aspects, the words and language, and how we should be selecting words and language. And then the second aspect is how we then build the words and language into appropriate sentences to start to formulate the communication. That will form today's session. In the next session, then, we'll go on to develop this in how we build that into paragraphs, punctuation, how we best use that to really communicate and emphasize our messages. And then we'll be looking at tone and style and the importance of that, again, to create powerful business writing. So first two aspects today. So words and language. This really is the raw material of business writing. Yeah. If we don't have words in business writing, we don't have anything. Unlike, say, a face-to-face communication situation where we can communicate face-to-face without using words. We can use body language, we can use gestures, we can use facial expressions. We do. Very, very important. Without words in business writing, we don't have anything. So fundamentally important that we consider this very first aspect, words and language, and how we use it. So I want to start by asking a question to you. Yeah. Thinking about the English language, how many words do you think there are in the English language? You'd like to maybe guess. Have a guess. Maybe you know. But have a guess. How many words in the English language? If you maybe want to put your guesses, or if you've got an informed guess, onto the chat box. How many words in the English language? Bit of a brain teaser to starters. How many words? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. I'll give you a clue. It is a lot. It is a lot. How many words? What would you expect? How many words in the English language? Any guesses? Nobody brave enough to guess? Okay, so we've got Dare Fikri, 7 million. Now, it's not quite as many as that. It is a lot, but it's not quite as many as that. Okay, so according to Google and Harvard University, there are approximately 1,022,000 words currently in use in the English language. And how words are recognized as being words and in use, it's when they're actually published in a dictionary. That's how a word becomes a word. Yeah. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, words are constantly being added to the language and words are falling out of use. Usually, this is determined by lifestyle, and technology has been a key driver for the development of the language. We see many, many words being added kind of annually to the language based on technological developments and how they steer our lifestyle. So if you think about the word selfie, yeah, going back 15 years, that wasn't a word. And now we just accept that's a word that we're using in everyday language because many, many of us, are regularly taking selfies, yeah? So lifestyle, technology usually drives a language. So we've got many, many words. Based on that then, the question is, which word do we choose? How do we go about choosing the right word? Some words are very familiar to us. Some words are not familiar to us. Some words seem a lot longer. Some words seem a lot shorter. How do we go about choosing the right words for business writing? So we've got a little bit of a message here in a video clip I'm going to share with you from the Friends series. It's a comedy, but there's a very serious message behind this video clip. So have a look at this for a couple of seconds and have a think about what is the main message in this video clip.
I don't understand.
Some of the words are a little too sophisticated for you.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, of course it does. It's smart. I used a Thesaurus. On every word?
Yep.
What was this sentence originally?
Oh, they're warm, nice people with big hearts. And that became they're humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps.
Yeah. And hey, I really mean it, dude.
Joey, I don't think we can use this.
Why not?
Well, because you signed it, Baby Kangaroo Tribbiani. Hey, why don't you stop worrying about sounding smart and just be yourself?
You know what? You don't need a thesaurus. Just write from here. Your full-sized aortic pump.
Okay, so a bit of comedy there, but the very serious point underneath all that is really a trap that many people fall into in terms of business writing, feeling the need to use very sophisticated, unfamiliar words in business writing. And really what we should be doing is the reverse. Yeah. Stop worrying about sounding smart and using simple, easy to understand words. That's one of the key rules about language in business writing. So from there, 2 key words for you to think about when you're selecting your language for business writing. One is responsibility. The writer is fully responsible for ensuring the reader understanding. Yeah, the writer is fully responsible. I've known people when I've been coaching them say things like, well, I put it down, I told them, I explained it. Yeah, but the reader didn't understand. Yeah, but not my problem. I wrote the facts as they were. The writer is completely responsible and making sure that the language they choose, that they select, is going to be understood by the reader. So responsibility is the first thing. Second thing is credibility. Yeah, so thinking about credibility of yourself as a professional and the professional brand that you're representing. So 2 key words when you're thinking about language selection. And we saw in the video clip there, but the result of Joey choosing, very long words, it looked quite ridiculous. It actually degraded the value of the writing. It sounded ridiculous. Yeah. So think about that. Responsibility and credibility. So business communication, we say as guidelines, what we should be avoiding are unfamiliar words. Words which are unfamiliar to you and words which are likely to be unfamiliar to the reader. Better to use familiar language. Wherever possible, majority shorter rather than longer words. If you open a document, an email or a report, and you see lots and lots of long words, the brain automatically switches on, thinks this is going to be difficult to unravel, to interpret. So wherever possible, shorter words. Avoiding what we call circumlocution. Now that's quite a long word. Yeah. What circumlocution means is talking around something using 10 words where we could use 2 or even 1. Single words. So it's about being economical with language. Very important. And using precise language. Precise, not vague language. Give the reader a chance to understand. Yeah, give them a chance. They shouldn't have to work so hard at understanding what you've written. So those are the basic guidelines on word selection. Have a look at some of these examples that we see in everyday writing. Yeah. In compliance with your request, too many words. We can chop that right down to as requested. Yeah. Think about this. If you had to pay 10 dirhams, say, for every word you used in an email, I guarantee your emails will be shorter, but they'd probably be a lot more impactful. Yeah, so getting your point across in fewer words, making impact. Enclosed herewith, please find. We don't use words like herewith in everyday language anymore. You wouldn't say that to somebody in the office. Yeah, herewith is your report. Then why do we write it? Yeah, very old-fashioned, clumsy, overlong phrases. Yeah, we can make it a lot clearer. Please find enclosed. With reference to your letter, again, we can shorten things regarding your letter. Kindly be advised. You wouldn't say that to somebody in a meeting, kindly be advised. You'd say, please note. Yeah, so making your writing reflect the kind of language you would use in a business face-to-face situation. In the amount of, yeah, here is a check in the amount of. Why not just say, here is a check for? Yeah, we cut down. We lose 3 words there. Yeah. In lieu of, and there we're actually going into a different language. Yeah, instead of using something very simple, instead of. And this is probably my favorite one. Please revert to as soonest. We may have said that kind of thing 50 years ago. It's not common natural language that we use today. Better to use something simpler. Please reply as soon as possible. So simplifying structures, yeah, making them reflect common everyday language, very important. Word redundancies, we see this all the time. Think about it. Do you need all the words that you're using? Because in business writing, less is more. So examples like absolutely essential. We don't need absolutely. Something's essential, you need it. Actual experience. Experience is experience, yeah? Different varieties. If we've got variety, they're different. It's implied in the word variety. First introduction. You can't actually have a second introduction. You don't need the word first. And this is my favorite one, I think, honest truth. Yeah, is there a dishonest truth? The word honest is completely redundant. Yeah, so think about this. Are you using redundant language and redundant structures? So we say, for your words to be powerful, it's about writing naturally with clear language and language that we use today. It's about being concise and brief. About using jargon only when appropriate. Now, jargon exists in every industry. Yeah, every industry has its own set of vocabulary, which mean significant things within that industry or organization. We have to think about, will that language be understood by the reader? Are they on the inside, or is it going to be something that they really just don't understand? If they're not going to understand it, you're even wasting your time writing the report or the email or whatever it is you're writing. So jargon only when appropriate. Avoiding repetition and using the correct word. Now you may think, of course you use the correct word, but do you always use the correct word? Do you always check that you've got the correct word? Because remember, what you write is going to reflect your credibility. So inserting an incorrect word into a written piece can really damage credibility. It can look either careless or it can look like you're lacking in knowledge. We need to be making sure that we're using the correct word. So I've got a little challenge, a little exercise for us to work through in the next couple of minutes. On the slide here, we've got 5 sentences, and within each sentence, there are a number of options for a particular word. The words in bold reflect words which are often confused. So I just want you to spend 2 minutes only, I'll set the timer, and select which of those options is actually the correct one. These are words which are typically confused. Okay, so I'll give you 2 minutes. Try this exercise yourself and just see if there are any of these that you're confusing in everyday language. So 2 minutes starts now. Okay, that's a 2 minutes. Let's just quickly go through these and you can check your own responses here. The first one, the new system it is the second option here, will ensure. We use ensure where it's a system, a situation. We use assure, the first one, where it's person to person. Those two are often confused. And insure, the third one, is something completely different. Insure is about insurance, protecting against a loss. So be careful on that one. We don't confuse those, yeah? That you're stationary, the second option is correct. That means pens, papers, and so on. Whereas the first one, stationary, means staying still, motionless, not moving. Products arrive the next day. The correct one is the second option, regardless of what time you place the order. We can't say irregardless of what time you place the order. The answer here is enquire with an E, but this is often confused. The majority of the time, I would say people incorrectly select the first one, inquire. Inquire comes from inquiry. That's like a formal investigation. For a general looking into something, we would say enquire with an E. Why there is, and the answer here is continuous noise in the background. The new legislation it's the first option, affect with an A. Effect with an E, that's about results. Affect is cause, effect, results. So the correct one is the first one there. Our expansion plans, adversely with a D. Averse means something different. Averse without the D means you're not willing to do something. It was an eminent. The correct one is E. Eminent means outstanding, whereas imminent means something completely different. Imminent means something's about to happen. So his arrival is imminent. It's going to happen in the next few minutes. Yeah. However, the clients appeared. Now, this is one that's very, very often confused. The answer is actually disinterested. Disinterested. Uninterested is not a word in the English language. So the opposite of interested is, in fact, disinterested. It's a bit like disengaged, displeased. Yeah, so disinterested is the right one here. I would like another. It's actually perspective, which means opinion, viewpoint. Prospective, the second one, means something's possible, potential. So you might have a prospective client. On how to apply the new principles or principles, the correct one is the second one, LES. That means guidelines, protocols. The answer here is proceed, which means go forward. The first one, precede, something that comes before. So we might say Sunday precedes Monday in the week. Any further or farther, the correct one is the first one. The second one, farther, is about distance. So we might say Alain is farther from Dubai than Sharjah, for example. So that was just a little exercise to ask you to think about this. Are you selecting the correct words? Are you checking? Because honestly, spelling checker will not always help you, and I'll show you why shortly. Now, often also people rely on things like Google Translate, but this is what can happen when they do. There's a quite famous example, something that happened in China when they launched Pepsi. And they wanted to convey the line, the tagline, the slogan, come alive with Pepsi. Somebody made a bit of a mistake in the translation, and it was translated as Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. Not really what Pepsi wanted to convey. So be careful. Be careful on things like Google Translate. Make sure it's the right word. Yeah, spelling checker is another one. I'm going to say now, you cannot rely on it 100%. Spelling checker is going to tell you if that word doesn't exist. It's not necessarily going to tell you whether you've got the right word for that context. Have a look at this. It's a bit of fun, but it makes a serious point again. I, that's I as in the facial feature, not as in I, myself. Half, that's as in 50%, not as in have. A spelling checker, it came with my PC. Okay, that doesn't mean the same as your laptop. It plainly marks 4, that's the number 4 rather than FOR. My review, mistakes I cannot see. That's C as in the ocean instead of SEE. I strike a key and type a word. And weight, that's weight as in heavy or light rather than WAIT. 4, again, we've got the number. It too, that should be TO, not TWO. Weather, that's like the climate weather. I am wrong. Or, that or is like the oar of a ship or a boat, yeah, instead of OR. Or write, again, that's right, like writing with a pen, whereas it should be RIGHT. It shows me straight away. I have run this poem through. Now, through, that's like through, I threw the ball instead of THROUGH. I am sure, that's sure like the seashore, not sure as in SURE. You're pleased to know. Again, we've got the number 2 instead of TO. No, it should be KNOW. It's spelling perfect all the way. My checker told me so. So there as in stitching instead of SO. This is an extreme example, but it's to make a point. We've got to be very, very careful that we don't rely or over rely on some of the tools that we've got available to us. We've got to check and double check. I cannot tell you how many times I've received responses, email responses from people, and they've read, "Thank you for your massage." I assure you, I've not been giving people massages. Yeah, they mean message. And I know, I guess that they mean message, but it doesn't look good. It looks a bit careless. So we're back to credibility, ethos. Yeah, so be careful, be careful. So, power of positive language as well. It's about using positive language. Always, power of positive language. Simple sentence here that we see a lot. If you require any further assistance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Yeah, whereas we can make that completely positive. We don't bring in negative words like hesitate. If you require any further information, please feel free to contact me. Think about positive language wherever we can. So think about words that you might be using that could have a negative effect and then change them into positive. There's always a way of presenting things in a positive way. So I'd urge you to do that. Key is simplicity and avoiding overlong sentences like this. An exciting opportunity to join the newly formed service modernisation team, which will lead to the drive for an even better practice and will play a significant role in creating a self-generating culture of improvement. This was a genuine advertisement for a job, a vacancy. And the vacancy, believe it or not, was for an administrative assistant. Nobody would ever be able to guess that. It takes unravelling. It's about being simple. Technical horticultural maintenance officer, that was an advertisement for a gardener. Not familiar language, doesn't look smart. A knowledge navigator, a job advertisement for a teacher. So thinking about this, are you being overcomplicated? Can you be simpler? Can you make it easier for the reader to understand? And this is an example here of how things can go wrong. You take one look at this paragraph here. Yeah, it's full of long sentences. Yeah, too many words, duplications. Further to our meeting, and as we discussed, the world of business today, as never before, as we said, has a permanently and constantly varying and often frequently, it goes on like this. And this is a genuine piece of the P. We've changed some of the words obviously to keep the confidentiality, but we often see things like this. Too many words, yeah, complicated structures, lack of sentence structure. This is how it can go wrong. So the second thing we need to think about is the way that we communicate in terms of sentence structure. Social media, whether we love it or hate it, it's here to stay. And things like Twitter have made a really big impact on the way that we expect to receive messages. Our attention spans have got shorter and shorter. And I believe now that our attention span is no more than 6 or 7 seconds. So we've got to think about this and think about the way that we communicate. Yeah, Twitter, you may use it, you may not, but it's an incredibly successful communication channel. And we see that more than 500 million tweets are posted every day. That's over 6,000 tweets per second. Yeah, news. Yeah, journalists use Twitter. Approximately a quarter of all verified Twitter accounts are journalists. World leaders use Twitter. So it's been adopted as a way of very, very concisely getting messages out to the public, getting messages out to many people very quickly. So we've become conditioned to expect this is the way that we're going to receive communication. We've got to think about this. Does your written communication have the impact of a tweet? We're not expecting you to write, with kind of incorrect and grammatical sentences with hashtags, but thinking about impact. And how we can do this, we can start to look at your sentences. Remember, attention, interest, desire, action. And think about these general guidelines for sentences. Keep most of your sentences short and direct. Averaging sentences 15 to 20 words. Averaging 15 to 20 words. Always, though, keeping within 40 words. No more than 40 words for impactful, easy to retain the reader attention and interest. You can vary the length for interest, but always keeping within that 40-word guideline and avoiding sentence sprawl. So only 1 or 2 main thoughts per sentence. So just having a look at this, I'm not going to ask you to do this now, but just showing you an example of how we can make sentences a lot shorter, a lot more impactful. First one, in our endeavour to ensure guest safety at all times, can visitors please note that fire bell testing is carried out every Monday at 9:30 a.m. We can make that a lot shorter, impactful. We test the fire bell every Monday at 9:30 a.m. Tom made it very clear we are perfectly capable of solving this extremely complex problem. Why not say Tom made it clear we're able to solve this complex problem? At the present time, we are experiencing a slump in sales. We can just say sales are falling, or presently sales are falling. Activities of illegal nature have been conducted in this specific area. Illegal activities have happened in this area or here. There's always a way of making things more concise, more impactful, still getting the same message across. So just a few examples there. Again, key is simplicity in sentence structure. So just to wind up really now, key takeaways for today. I'm sure you'll all take your own takeaways from the session. But headlines. Remember, business writing is persuasive writing. The art of rhetoric is about persuasion, ethos, pathos, logos. We've got to appeal to each of those 3 areas. Remember, just in the same way that marketing people use the AIDA model, we're looking at attention, interest, desire, and action, and how we keep that in business writing. Rules for word selection: familiar words, shorter words, and precise language. It's about being concise and avoiding redundancies. Check. Do you need all the words you're using? And it's about being accurate, choosing the right words. Sentences, remember, absolute maximum 40 words per sentence, but we're looking for average of 15 to 20 words. We've got to keep the reader interest. And in summary, I'd ask us to remember communication works well for those who work at it, and we've all got to keep working at communication. In the absence of other tools, in writing, you are what you write. Yeah, as I said earlier, your writing becomes your face in business writing, and the language is a fundamental part of that. In part 2, we'll be looking at some more aspects of the power of language, and so we look forward to sharing those with you then. So you might want to commit to action from today's session, things that you want to do less of, things that maybe you want to keep doing, you recognize you're already doing well, you want to keep doing. Things that maybe you haven't thought of doing now, up to now, and you're going to start doing, or things that maybe you've identified today that you're going to stop doing. It could be using redundant words, where you think they're emphasizing a point, and they could be doing actually the reverse. Okay, so could I ask, has anybody got any questions at all? Anybody got any questions? Feel free to pop any questions onto the chat box now. We've got a couple of minutes left for questions. Any questions from anybody? Okay, so thank you, Nadine. That's a good question. How can language affect a response? In a number of ways. If we're using incorrect language, the language we use can have a really, really big effect on people's emotions. We know that. Different words can be interpreted in certain ways. So first of all, it can have an emotional impact. Which is why we say it's really, really important to be using positive language, even if we have to convey some kind of message which might not be the most welcome message to the recipient. So it's about carefully selecting language and thinking about how that's going to impact emotions. Also, if we're using a language which is incorrect, it could affect your response in terms of your language. Your message might be overlooked, it might be put to one side, it might be dismissed, because it's all about the whole credibility thing. So from two aspects, really, from an emotional connection point of view, but also from a more rational point of view, it can affect what the kind of rational response we get as well. The two aspects. Any other questions? Okay, so yes, so key learning points really. First of all, let's just go back to the key takeaways. Firstly, to remember that whenever we're involved in business writing, we're involved in persuading people of facts of a particular course of action. So therefore, we've got to think about that. Are we approaching it from that point of view? We don't have the other devices that we've got in a face-to-face situation. So thinking about that, persuasive writing, thinking about the tools that we can use, the frameworks that we can use to actually persuade people. and thinking about the key, I guess, headline in terms of word selection, which is the first aspect we've got today, is keeping things simple, keeping language familiar, the kind of language we use today, making sure it's accurate, and being concise. Less is more for business writing. And then moving out from there, sentences, making sure that we create and use sentences with impact. Yeah, with impact. Those are the key things I would say from today. Okay, so questions here. How do we overcome problems when we have to use jargon? Absolutely, there will be situations where you have to use jargon. You need to use a particular word for a reason. What I would say at that point, you would need, if you weren't sure that the reader would understand that word, you need to include some kind of explanation. Yeah, if it's in an email, maybe you include something in brackets that explains it, or a couple of sentences that explain it. If it's in a report, maybe you add some kind of a glossary or something that will explain what that vocabulary is all about. Yeah, that's how we would get around it. Yeah. Okay. All right. When is appropriate to use longer words in business writing? I wouldn't use longer words just for the sake of it. Yeah. Longer words where we have to use a word for a particular reason, but that word has got to be one that is appropriate for the context and that's going to be understood by the reader. Yeah. I would not be using a word just because it's long. Yeah. If there's a shorter word that does the job equally as well, I would opt for the shorter word. Yeah, if it's conveying the same kind of meaning, I would opt for the shorter word. Psychologically, when we see shorter words, the brain doesn't start to think, I'm going to have to work very hard to understand this. Okay, so what do I think of the quote, too many cooks spoil the broth? Okay, now, too many cooks spoil the broth. And my understanding of that expression is that when too many people are involved in something, we can lack organization, we can lack order. How could we apply this to business writing? Well, when do we think many people are involved in business writing? It could be that to compile a particular report, for example, maybe a detailed or complex report, there can be a lot of people involved. What that needs then is a clear leader who's going to bring in the different parts to a report, check that the language is appropriate, yeah, moderate, make sure that things are kept economical, that things are kept consistent. We'll be talking next time about consistency, for example, consistency in spelling, consistency in layout, and so on. So that's the time when I think really in business writing, we could apply that kind of expression, too many cooks spoil the broth. I think if generally we're talking about things like emails, it tends to be one person is writing one email, but we're looking at other types of writing, maybe business briefs, reports, and so on. That's where we could have several people involved. Good questions. Anybody else got any questions at all? Any more questions? We've just got a minute or so. Okay, so we'll close things there. I'd like to thank you all for participating. Thank you for your questions and your feedback there. Thank you again to TDRA for giving us this opportunity to share this very, very important session with you. And we look forward to developing this a little bit further in part 2. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day and take care. Thank you.